As a mental health advocate and author, I love books. Books have the capacity to inspire, educate, transform, and ultimately help readers all over the world. So if you want to publish your book or if you need help writing your story, I highly recommend Mindstir Media, rated the #1 best book publisher around the country. Mindstir Media can help you no matter where you are in the book writing or publishing process. Go to mindstirmedia.com to learn more and schedule a consultation.
Out Comes the Sun with Mariel Hemingway and Melissa Yamaguchi. Out Comes the Sun compassionately helps you navigate mental wellness practices that you can apply to your daily life. And we tell your story. And now, Mariel Hemingway and Melissa Yamaguchi.
Welcome to Out Comes the Sun radio podcast. We are so excited. Again, today we have another great guest, but I'm going to keep that. I'm going to keep it
on the QT.
I'll keep it on the QT right now. But first, we're going to do our little sunrise with Melissa and Mariel, because that's what we do. We catch up on life, on communication, on all kinds of things. So what are we going to talk about today, Melissa? What are we catching up on today?
Yeah, I was talking to you the other day, and I think it's worth you and I sharing about people's relationship with money.
Oh, yes.
Your relationship to people is one thing you have to navigate through life. But then when you think about our relationship to money, a lot of it is imprinted on our brain from wee childhood to where we really don't have any concept of what this thing called money is. All we know is it either creates a lot of joy or it creates a lot of stress. And so we feel that vibrational energy and as it moves around us. And I find it fascinating. I was reading something recently about a man was talking about how to break the generational tie you have in your relationship to money. And he said, first you have to get really quiet and understand what that means, where it came from, and try to be very honest with yourself about that relationship to money and how it has affected you. And he said, go back as far as you can.
Right.
So that's a quiet moment that I think some people may not understand, that it's in their power to slow down,
Right.
and find out what that is. Where did I start to get this idea that money is scary, or money is the root of all evil, or whatever the phrase is that they've adopted from childhood.
Right. Well, it's so interesting because I grew up, the one side was like we were totally comfortable with money because they had money at some level. But my mother, being a what do you call it? A kid from the Depression. She saved things in the refrigerator for weeks. It was a little frightening. Like, it was disgusting. Quite honest. It was kind of gross. But she saved things. She had this terrible relationship with money. And that was how I was led to believe that, money was bad. And I remember it's interesting. We went to a person's house that lived down the road from us on Highway 75 in Idaho. And they had this beautiful house, and we went in and I was mesmerized. It was so pretty. It had a little like bridge over a creek, and it was so cool. And I kept saying, I was 10 or something, and I kept saying, oh my gosh, your house is so beautiful. It's just so nice. I wish I could have a house like this. My mother got so mad at me when we got home. She said, I don't know even what the lesson was, but I was so careful about like expressing like excitement over abundance, like abundance over glamorous thing. I felt tremendous shame about it. And, you and I work with somebody, Dr. Dana. So we work with this woman. She does, what do they call it?
Trigger therapy.
What?
Trigger therapy.
There's trigger therapy and it's called something. Anyway, I've lost my mind. It'll come to me. And she works on those emotional ties that we have to money, to our relation. And we really do have to change that dialogue as a
Yes.
society. It's, money, like you say all the time, and you remind me of, money is energy.
Money's
It's
energy.
just energy. It's just the exchange of energy. And if you don't have that exchange,
That's right.
then, it's actually not good. So giving your services away for free and all that stuff, even though it's ingrained in us, it's like, oh, and especially if you're on a spiritual path, you think it's just bad, right? We think, oh my goodness, this is not a good thing. I find this conversation so, I think it's important for all of us to have it, and find out where your triggers are, right?
Well, and I want to encourage people to have this conversation before you commit to any kind of relationship, whether it be personal or professional. You get into a marriage, you get into a business relationship, you room with friends, the conversation around money needs to be as vital a topic as, how do you guys feel about cleanliness? How do you feel about whatever your topics of importance are? How do you feel about belief system? In business and in personal life, you've got to have a conversation about money. You got to get comfortable. A lot of people say, no, let them take care of it. Recently, and I can wrap this up, I know we've got a most amazing, lovely guest. I want us to wrap up, and I don't want to bump into anyone's time. But one thing I do want to say is, and we can dive into this later if you would like, Mariel, is I'm understanding the power of energy that it has over people as life is passing. So as wills and trust and everything start coming into the conversation with family members as they age, you see a different dynamic start to pop up that maybe everyone kept suppressed for a long time. So that energetic conversation around money should be had early and often to keep it flowing beautifully like a river.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much. That was lovely. And stay tuned, everybody. Don't go away. We've got the most amazing guest. And she's actually somebody I've become quite fond of, number one, and quite close to, number two. And I've done 2 projects with her. So I'm excited to introduce my next step. So stay tuned. We will get to our guest very, very soon.
Come back.
Welcome, everybody, to Out Comes the Sun radio podcast. We have an amazing guest. Actually, she's become a friend of mine. Her name is Mary McCluskey. She is a writer. She is a doctor. She is extraordinary. She helps children. And Melissa and we are passionate about helping children. I'm going to read you what I wrote, kind of a simulation of what I wrote for your book. My forward to your book. So
Great.
I'm gonna start with my father. Jack Hemingway was the eldest son of the famous American writer Ernest Hemingway. He was one of the most important writers of the 20th century and now the 21st century. And he's still considered one of the greatest writers of all time. My father lived in the shadow of that greatness and never knew how to measure up to the world-renowned Ernest Hemingway. The legacy of creativity from my amazing grandfather was a gift to all of us, but also an overwhelming responsibility. Many members of my family struggled with both mental illness and addiction. My trauma came from watching my siblings and parents fall apart from their inability to communicate. I was hoping as a young girl, as young as 8 years old, that I could be the person in the family that could make everything better for everyone. I thought that if I was really good and helpful to my parents, that I could help make their pain go away. Of course, as a child, I had no clue that my family and their issues were completely normal or that they weren't mine. What I did understand is that I didn't always feel seen or heard as a child. I believed by trying to be good, I looked fine in their eyes. I appeared to not be a worry for anyone. It left me feeling tremendously lonely and quietly quite scared. So we love wholeheartedly our siblings, our parents, our friends, and of course our pets if we have them. No one can genuinely prepare us for the journey that growing up entails. there may be exposures in our young lives that are daunting and hugely traumatic. We simply have faith in the ones we love to protect, that we simply love and protect us, and faith that our world will be okay. We oftentimes carry terrifying feelings with us based on events that happen to us and around us. When those in place to help us don't have the answers, we need the tools to help us get through those scary and misunderstood times and misunderstood feelings. So here today was a very long, I've read my forward. I don't know what I was thinking.
It's beautiful.
Here today on Out Comes the Sun is Dr. Mary McCluskey to help us with some of these questions that, well, what I love about your work, really, after all that said, and my own childhood, that's my story. But when you're in it and when you're a child, those questions are big. And those feelings of loneliness are enormous. And what you do with your books and your work is really help children to understand, and learn to communicate. I think that what was so hard about my childhood is that I had no ability to communicate. I actually felt stifled and scared to communicate because I thought I might get in trouble. I had some, that was some weird thing. So I guess my I don't know. I welcome you, but I really want you to.
Can I start by saying it's not weird at all?
Okay. Good.
It's not
Thank
weird at all. And it's exactly what I see all the time, and is just, rampant with children in society, is this sense of, not being able to express themselves. And I do think that most issues come from that, from this fear of not being able to, because either they're going to get in trouble or they're wrong, there's something wrong with them, but just this sense of not being able to be themselves.
Right.
Creates so many problems in our society.
So how do you address that? How do you address that with children? I mean, because it is a different kind of conversation to have with a child, right? I mean, how do you bring that up? What do you I think being a parent, but I long since screwed my kids up. So no, I'm sorry. I mean, honestly, I wish I'd had this ability to communicate in the way that you do. I'd love for you to explain kind of how you go about extrapolating the questions and then getting them to communicate with you. Because that's the hardest thing about talking with a child, is there's a way of getting in, right? And
Right.
I think that you have that way. So maybe you could explain a bit of your process.
Well, it's interesting, Mariel. It's one of the reasons that I've written my books, because I find that using them as a therapeutic tool and having them read the story and read about the characters having different feelings normalizes their feelings and gets them to open up more. So oftentimes it's a really good conduit into, well, what did you think about, when Sasha said this? And then all of a sudden they feel like, oh, okay, it's okay to feel shame or whatever feeling it might be. And a lot of times kids don't have the vocabulary. And again, that was a reason that I wrote the book, was to kind of give them the tools, because language is really important. And if they can express themselves verbally, it makes things a lot easier. A lot of times in kids, we see somatic symptoms, we see stomach aches, headaches, all sorts of body issues. You may be familiar with the book, The Body Keeps the Score. Bessel van der Kolk wrote it. It's a wonderful book, and it talks about how our bodies store trauma. And so a lot of times, I work with I work with both children and adults. And when working with adults, I'm also working with the child part of the adult, of course, right? Because there's so much healing that needs to happen. And it all does stem from these childhood wounds. So getting them to open up, it depends on the child, but a lot of times I actually find that, when they're not able to express why they're feeling anxious, which is something we see all the time, they're feeling, anxiety. I say, can you draw or paint your anxiety?
Mm.
And then they're able to actually put it on paper and draw, a beautiful whatever, and to kind of give voice to it by saying, I drew this because I was thinking about this. And it kind of helps to give them a different medium, because children need that. And it's also helpful, the creativity to kind of let their own light shine. A lot of times, I think kids these days are way too structured, have way too many activities, and it doesn't leave a lot of time for them to create and to problem solve in the same way that it did years ago.
Absolutely.
And
Melissa and I talk about that all the time, just the fact that our childhoods were so different. I'm sure you feel the same way. Our childhoods, in the summer, you took off at 8, 9 a.m. and you weren't back till 8, 9 p.m.
When the lights came on.
Maybe you came back for dinner,
Yeah.
there was a thing, and you felt safe. And, there's a whole list of reasons why we don't do that. But and I tried to create a bit of that with my own children, because I do think we've structured the heck out of them so that they don't have time to just use their imagination and go through feelings. Don't you agree? I don't know.
absolutely. And actually, I think imagination is probably, if not the most, but one of the most healing parts of therapy, is being able to reimagine things, reimagine your past, your life. I do a therapy called EMDR.
Yes.
And it is so incredible because it helps to reprocess trauma in a way that the person can actually use their own internal resources, which is their creativity, their imagination, and really just utilizing what they need to kind of recreate a different narrative for themselves that helps to clean their nervous system, right? Because all of our trauma gets trapped in our nervous systems, in our bodies. And so it's opened my eyes to really the power of imagination, which kids have down, right? Yeah. And we need to really foster that more. I think it gets, when people get older, the play stops, and the imagination is kind of underutilized. But I think it's really important that, we find ways of tapping into the creative ability of people in general, not just children.
Absolutely.
Dr.
Well, don't
McCluskey,
come over to our house because Bobby and I are always playing. Go ahead, Melissa. Sorry.
I was going to ask Dr. McCluskey, first of all, thank you for being here. And secondly, I'm having raised 2 children myself. Now they're ages 21 and 23, and they seem to be raising me. So one of the things that I have a question for you. Mariel and I talk about frequently is mindset. And so if someone has experienced trauma in his or her life, and they come, then now they're a parent, but they're recognizing, and maybe they don't like that they are parenting in the same fashion, in the way that perhaps they were parented as a child, and they can recognize that, oh, I didn't like it when mom or dad did that, and here I am doing it. And it's this locked in mindset that we often have, is just doing what we did, what was done to us. And it doesn't have to be as egregious as physical abuse, but it can be emotional, or it can be emotional abuse, which is traumatic as well. So when an adult comes to you, what are some of the first steps, aside from identifying what he or she has suffered through, so they can put a name to it and identify it clearly? What are some of the tools that you work with them so that they don't, if they have a desire to not pass this on, this generational trauma?
So you're talking about parents,
That's right.
when parents come to me. So, the fact that they're coming at all, I mean, first of all, I congratulate them, because that's the first step. I mean, kids who are suffering are coming from parents that are suffering. It's almost always a parallel process. And so I help the parents to work with the, what they're still struggling with, which oftentimes is self-hate that's left over from their childhood, right? That their parents put onto them. And now they have the, that they might put onto their own children, because that's what happens. All of a sudden, these parents who are self-hating, they want their kids to do everything right and perfect. And I vote to get perfect taken out of the dictionary, because I think it's probably the worst, the worst thing there is. But, parents use their children as extensions of themselves.
Yes.
And so that's really where I focus on, is trying to really delineate those boundaries between the parent and the child, because they're different people, but really making that very clear. And that perhaps that was also a problem for them growing up. And that's why, so if we can help them see what happened to them, it's much easier for them to say, pause, I'm not going to do this to my own child.
Right.
I like that.
Yeah, I like that. I like that too, because I mean, it's classic. You see people pushing their kids into sports, and it's, and it's like, no, you've got to keep doing it. You've got to keep, being competitive. And really, who is that about? It's interesting. And what, I guess because I've done a lot of work, so much, too much work maybe on myself, and, and trying to do the right thing or whatever. It's astonishing to me that you don't see it, but of course you can't see what you can't see, right?
Yeah.
Or you haven't addressed, or you haven't told the story of. And let's get back to your books, because your books are they're wonderful. They're whimsical. They're beautiful, but it really, getting back to imagination, they encourage you to, or a kid to use their imagination. So you've got it's beautifully illustrated, and it invites the children to have an imaginative experience with the book. I love that about your books. They help you to get to those answers, for a kid.
Well, and that was the intent, was to hope to get them to be able to kind of learn new skills and to think about things in different ways, and, create scenarios where, they can relate to the characters. But the book started out, and I think this is actually an important point. The first book, The Leader of the Parade, was based on Alfred Adler, as a psychologist back during the time of Freud. But he created this great educational movement that unfortunately got shut down by the Nazis. And it was really about just empowering families and teaching parents to be parents. And it was just a wonderful idea. That's what inspired me to write the book and create him as a character. But one of the things that I wanted to point out today was that he had said something that I think is so profound, which is that children are wonderful observers, but they are terrible interpreters. And I think it's such an important thing for parents to understand, because they notice every single thing you do, right? You notice kids looking, you're doing your hair, you're both parents, so you know how this goes. And they're just watching, and they notice every little thing. But they don't have the cognitive capacity to actually understand it all. And so then they create their own little narratives in their mind that the parents don't have access to. And then they create these life, Adler calls it life goals, faulty life goals, where they're working with the wrong information because it was never corrected. And that's what his centers were kind of designed to do, to kind of understand what children were thinking. And then if we can understand what they're thinking and they're not correct, then we can correct that, right? And we can put them back on the right path. But too many times kids are kind of left to their own devices, especially now with the devices, right? Yeah. And they're just doing whatever they want. But they're really using a lot of faulty information because developmentally they can't make sense of it. And that's why parents and adults are just really important parts of how to kind of teach children how to kind of better navigate the world,
Mhm.
right? They may look older, they may have a smartphone, all of those things, but they don't know what's going on. And they create these stories, these narratives that we have no idea about. And then all of a sudden we're finding out they're feeling suicidal,
Right.
and it's all based on faulty information.
Well, and I mean, yeah, I mean,
A lot of it's faulty.
and I talk about this all the time. The idea that, we know because we also come from a different generation, but we also know because we're adults and we've had enough experience that we know. But looking at devices and Instagram and TikTok and this and that, and seeing you talk about false information. It's all false. It's all like prefabricated. It's all created. It's all filtered. It's all this. And that's so hard on a kid who doesn't have the emotional experience to say, oh, well, that's crap. I know that's not real.
Well, parents can't even say it's crap. That's the problem.
That's right.
No,
That's right.
yeah, you're
It's
so
their,
right.
it's a direct reflection.
You talking about the creative process for children. If I may share a short story here, I have two great nephews and a great niece, and the oldest child is now 9 and very stoic young man, and whereas his younger brother is the life of the party with all of his dancing and whatnot. But the older one has really taken on the crux of responsibility, and the children have experienced some trauma in their lives. And it wasn't until this past weekend that I learned of a breakthrough with the eldest child. And he was visiting my mother, his great grandma, and she's a former English teacher. And he said, "Do you use your computer?" And she said, "I do. Do you know how to use it?" And he said, "Of course." He opened it to some of my mother's writings. And he said, "May I write something?" And she said, "Please." She got him a blank sheet. He began to write poetry. Nobody in the family knew that this child could write. First of all, we knew he was a bright child, but we didn't know that he had that creative flow, that haiku coming through. And he completely began writing this incredibly expressive poetry that none of us knew he had, that he was feeling any of the things that came through on these short 5 or 6 little lines that were so impactful, Dr. McCluskey. So I can imagine in your line of work when being you're being the revelation of information that comes forth from this child. I'm very encouraged by what you're saying. I'm definitely purchasing your book for my nephews and nieces so they can have them for their children and my own children, and me too. I would like to learn more how I can be better.
Well,
Mariel,
I actually really think they are family books. They're really written for parents to read with their children, like a family book club,
Yes.
because it opens up room for discussion, for bonding, for, increasing attachment. That's one of the biggest things I see is that there's not, um, any kind of mental illness. There's always an insecure or a disorganized type attachment. And so there needs to be a lot more work done on how do we help kids feel more attached, safer. Safety is also a big issue in the world. But the books are really written for families.
They really
love
are.
that.
And they're very, they're kind of doing, like they're doing, I love, Dr. Adler's story is so incredible because it was so long ago. Yeah. Here's what I love about, some of the great geniuses that came so long before. It's like, what did they know about the future?
Yeah.
Like, and we keep going back. Oh, right. It's the way of, thinking so long ago. They were on the precipice of really, because I think those great minds knew something was coming. Right. I think that the world, Melissa and I have conversations about this. The world is changing. It's not going to go back. So we have to, talking to you makes me realize the importance of educating children just on communication skills and life skills, like everyday life skills. I mean, I talk about lifestyle things, getting out in nature and eating and breathing and exercising and drinking water. They seem so basic and ridiculous.
They're so important though. Those are equally as important. All of those things need to be.
But I guess we need to educate people on things that we thought were just, we breathe, so we must know how to breathe, but actually nobody knows how to breathe. Nobody knows, and nobody knows how to communicate, and everybody's afraid to step on toes. I think that's another issue of the generation we're in now, is that you don't know what's okay to say. Like that's difficult as kids become teenagers. It's like, wow, then you have to negotiate a whole new set of rules. But it seems to me that if you can have books like yours, books like, well, give me the names of your books, because I want everybody to go out and buy each one of them. Please say the name of each one of your books, because I love
So
them.
the first one is The Leader of the Parade. And the second book is called Bubbles, Balloons, and Birds.
I love the titles.
It's so wonderful. I know, it's so, and let's get back to that play, right? Like,
Joy.
kids aren't playing. We've got to get them playing. We've got to get them outside and using their imagination. Because I just started like 15 years ago, and damn, I'm not stopped.
I'm buying you a basket of bubbles for your birthday.
Melissa, in the book, the kids use the bubbles to blow away their fears. That's the.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah. I mean, it's.
Well, then I'm deaf. I love it.
It's so basic, but it's, again, it's using the imagination to be able to problem solve, right? And so what's easier than taking a bubble and saying, okay, I'm going to put my fear in the bubble and I'm going to watch it pop.
What's so interesting about you saying this, because I meditate a lot, and I do a lot of my own meditation, but I also do guided meditation. And some of the best guided meditations are ones where you fill up, and then you let it, you fill it up with whatever you don't need, and you let go into the universe that which doesn't serve you anymore. So
absolutely.
So apparently, we all want to be kids again, blowing bubbles and blowing our fears away. We
should.
Yeah, we should. This is such a fun conversation, such an important conversation for our audience to hear. And I'm sure any of you out there with children and also with grandchildren, which I am now a grandmother, so I have a grandchild. So I'm going to get a copy of each book again, even though I've got one, but I want another one to give to my daughter for my now little granddaughter, who's not reading yet, but I'm sure it's coming soon.
She's a Hemingway. She'll read.
She'll read. She'll write.
She'll write. Do it all.
She'll do it all.
Mary, thank you so much for coming on our show. We are so grateful.
Thank you so much for having me.
It's so much fun. And your books, again, are so wonderful. We really encourage everyone to go to your site. Your site, which is Mary McCluskey, DSW.com.
Yes.
You can go there. You can get her book. She's also on Facebook as facebook.com/encouragement
Inc., I think. Right?
Encouragement Inc. And Inc is INK.
Yes.
As Inc. Okay. So please go there, get informed, send your grandchildren and your children these books, because they're important and they're good, and they will. And also, you might as well just get them for yourself. Thank you so much, Mary. Lovely.
Thank you so much for having me. Yes, absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome back to Out Comes the Sun, because out comes the sun today on your radio station, in your car. Thank you so much for being with us. I'm Melissa Yamaguchi, and I have a little tip to share with you. So we're heading into summer, And what that means for energetically is that summer holds its own energy. It's known as a very yang energy. It's known as a very heavy energy. And it's when our clothing needs to get lighter. And here's some tips. Lighten up your food choices. Fruit is obviously so important. It's fruit, it's very fruitful, very, very prolific during the summer months, but it's also incredibly important for your energetic constitution. It keeps everything light for you. So lighten up your food. We don't have anything heavy. It's why we don't have heavy lasagnas and stews and big souffles. We keep everything lighter. Well, souffles can be light, but everything really light. A lot of plant-based, a lot of fruit-based, and lighter even on your protein choices. Then the next thing to incorporate into your world in the month of summer is the color white or pastels. Now, I don't look especially good in pastels, but if you look good in pastels, then bring them on in. But if you look good in whites, then bring those in. And the reason behind that is the colors are lighter and it doesn't carry the heavy feel. My husband is a hairstylist. I come from the beauty industry with him. I am want to walk around in black. I do have some black linen. So if you do choose darker colors, as I do, then make sure that the material is lighter. That makes sense, right? We do cottons and linens and lighter fabrics during the summer. The next thing I want to bring to your attention is, because the summer months are what we know in feng shui as fire energy, you need to incorporate more water. When it becomes too much fire, we bring in water. And now you may be thinking to yourself, Melissa's saying stuff that is incredibly just common sense and logical. Well, a lot of feng shui is. It's very logical. So in the summer months, ensure that you are incredibly hydrated. Water is a great balancer to too much fire. So calm down the heat. Out comes the sun. Stick around, everybody, because up next is Mariel Hemingway. Mariel's going to share her incredible wisdom when it comes to creating health and balance in your life. Stay tuned.
Thank you, everybody. And thank you, Melissa, for that introduction into the balance tip of the day. So you've been talking about summer. I'm going to continue on this mode of summer talk. Summer is a time, and you brought up water. Water is so incredibly important. This is the time of year. It's always the time of year to drink water, but connecting with water is really important. It's just, you want to hydrate. Hydration is incredibly important for our well-being on so many levels. I don't know if you know this, but 90% of most humans on the planet are in a drought. Physically in a drought. They don't drink enough water. A lot of people believe that if it's liquid, it's hydrating you. Liquid doesn't hydrate you. Coffee, tea, diet drinks, this, that, and the other thing. They do not hydrate. Water is the only thing that really hydrates. So when you think about water, I really want you to focus. Water is your main source of liquid in the body, right? We are made up of, as a baby, you're 90% water. You're 90% saline solution. You just come out of this beautiful, warm, and delicious, saline, and you've come into the world and you're still kind of part of that. It's like we come from the sea. We apparently initially we did sort of evolve out of the ocean. So always remember, that we need water. So as an adult, we should be made up of 70 to 75% water, but most people are like 55 to 65. And something that Bobby talks about often is when somebody dies, and this, I'm not trying to be morbid, but when somebody dies and they go into the morgue, what they do to, if there's an open casket, is they fill them with water, with saline solution. And all of a sudden, people will often say, oh my gosh, they look so peaceful, they look so young. It's because they'd been so dehydrated prior to that they did look old. Aging has a lot to do with losing fluid in the body. So drinking water is beyond important. So here's one of the things I do. I wake up in the morning, and after I've done a bit of stretching in bed and some gratitude thoughts and a little bit of meditation, although I do a major meditation after my water, I go into the kitchen and we spin water. We have a thing called the Vitalizer Plus. It makes the water, it's called functional water. Regardless, it doesn't have to be that, but I do put minerals in my water, and I also add a little bit of Redmond's real salt. And the reason why I do salt is we need salt. After a night of being asleep, salt activates. We're made up of electricity, so salt helps activate our cells and everything. So I do a little bit of salt, and I do 32 ounces, right? I kind of guzzle 32 ounces right away. That sounds like a tremendous amount of water, and it is, but because our water is filled with minerals and, we don't immediately go pee, right? It's because your body needs it. It needs that hydration, and starting the day that way, it's incredible. I'm going to tell a little story about, and I sometimes suffer from, like, I'll have hip pain or back pain. When I do my Redmond's real salt and my water and I'm hydrated enough, that back pain will go away within a half an hour. It's astonishing how water and minerals really just enable the body and the joints to function better. So that's my tip of the day. Please. We had summer coming. You got to drink water. You got to drink water all the time. Start right now. All of us, we're just going to run and go have a drink of water. I don't know where my water, but here it is.
I just had my drink, and sometimes my back hurts so much, I just might go out and get a salt cube and lick on that for a while.
Yes.
No, doesn't work that way.
It's not,
okay.
It's not a joke.
No, I don't think it is. You told me that.
Yeah. Now we live in a society, it's like, don't eat salt, you get high blood pressure. Yeah. Bad salt, don't Morton's iodized salt, which is processed, is not good for you. But Redmond's real salt is good for you. And I said this on a tip before, but it's so true. We need salt, we need water, we need them together. Do it. You love yourself. Yes, do it. Way, what a great show. Mary is such an interesting, anybody, you and I are both feel that way about anybody who's helping little kids to understand their lives. And I remember what it was like being a kid who didn't know how to communicate and felt I wrote a book called I Am Invisible Girl, because I did feel invisible. And no kid should feel invisible. And that's not a poor me story. It's just, the truth is we all need to help our children be more communicative and feel safe to tell to tell people what's going on in their lives. So thank you again. Thank you, Melissa, for being my extraordinary co-host, and I just love what we're doing together, and I love our conversations. I love the people that we're talking to, and thank you all for listening every single day to Out Comes the Sun.
Our audience, you guys help us vibrate. You might just see Mariel and me flying through the sky. The vibrations are so high. You guys are lifting us up.
Yep, and it makes you sing, which just I love. It makes me laugh. Thank you, everyone.
Out Comes the Sun has been a production of Evolve Entertainment. Hosts Mariel Hemingway and Melissa Yamaguchi. Executive producer Jeremiah Higgins. And sound engineer and producer Richard Dr. D. Dugan. Thank you for listening.